Today we're going to be talking about how long you should stay silent after a breakup. And specifically, I'd like to talk about three things. Number one is really understanding the purpose of silence when it comes to a no contact rule after a breakup. The second thing is really me putting a new twist on no contact rule timeframes. And third, navigating the dismissive avoidance stages during a no contact rule. Now, if you're a veteran of this YouTube channel or my website or my podcast or wherever you may have heard me talk about some of this stuff, this may seem repetitive, but I assure you, because I'm adding a new twist to it, it's going to be different and arguably better. So I'd encourage you to pay attention throughout the entirety of this video. So first things first, let's understand the simple question of how long you should stay silent after a breakup. Now, usually when someone asks me about silence, they're ultimately inquiring about the no contact rule, which I've written many articles about, filmed many videos on. So I don't want to really go too in depth on the no contact rule, but for those of you who aren't familiar with our way of doing things here, at least on our YouTube channel, our official definition of the no contact rule is as follows. It refers to a period of time where you cut off all conceivable communication with an ex after a breakup. Now, the intent of the tactic should not be used to make your ex miss you, but instead should be used to rebuild your own life so that you can begin the process of outgrowing your ex. Now, by doing this, the no contact rule can have this awesome benefit of making an ex miss you. So that should do it, right? You should stay silent after a breakup for however long the no contact rule is for, right? Well, before I'd answer that, I'd like to show you some research. Now, most of the people that end up entering into our orbit and engage in a no contact rule do so because they believe that it will help make their ex want them back. Usually, they gauge this by having the expectation that an ex will reach out to them during no contact. But about that. So 2021 and 2020, really the last couple of years, were really great for us from an information gathering perspective. And one of the things that I was really curious about was how often those clients that we had who ended up using a no contact rule on their ex, how often those exes that had the no contact rule used on them actually reached out. And the results weren't great. In fact, over 60% of our participants said that their ex did not reach out to them during a no contact rule. So the majority of people who are probably going to use a no contact rule on their ex won't see any type of reach out from an ex at all. And we think this is because the vast majority of our clients who have exes tend to be avoidant. So of course they're not going to reach out first. But this brings up a fundamental issue with silence after a breakup. Often people value silence only because of its function to create desire within an ex. And the thinking is simple. If I'm silent, my ex will miss me and want to come back or relive some of the top moments from our relationship. Now, here's the problem with that. When you actually interview success stories, when we actually talk to people who are successfully getting their exes to reach out to them, we're finding that the people who go into a no contact rule / silent period with the intent of just trying to get their ex to miss them or get them back, they end up never really getting that desired result. Now, why? Why is that? Well, I think it's important to understand the time frames to really understand the silent component. Like, how long should you stay silent after a breakup? Now, I'm going to say something extremely controversial, something that will kind of fly in the face of what I've recommended in the past. And it doesn't have to, as it's more of an intent issue, but more on that in a second. Let's stick to the basics right now. Generally speaking, we recommend 3 distinct time frames when it comes to the no contact rule. You have a 21-day rule, a 30-day rule, and a 45-day rule. Now, which reigns supreme? This is the ultimate question. Well, that's actually a complicated question to answer as well, because everyone has a different situation, and everyone's situation is wholly unique to them. As a result, different no contact timeframes are kind of required. So here's the general rule I would say. Most people, like 90% of people, are going to end up doing a 30-day rule. They'll end up failing that 30-day rule. But we're not talking about failures right now. We're just talking about the general speaking person who's watching this video. So let's say you're doing a 30-day rule. The first question you got to really answer here is asking or understanding if your ex is reaching out excessively to you. Now, if they are reaching out excessively to you, have they contacted you with at least 7 positive reach outs. And if that's the case, then you can shift to a 21-day rule. Notice I'm not saying, end the no contact rule and contact them right away. I don't believe that. I think that you need to see your no contact rule through to the end, and usually that's the best thing. So I like to think of no contact rule timeframes as adaptable. So we have 21-day rule, 30-day rule, 45-day rule. Which reigns supreme? It just depends on your situation, but that's what I used to think. Here is sort of the fly in the ointment.
Real quick, I want to say that if you're new to this YouTube channel or you're trying to figure out what you should be doing to get your ex back and you're trying to learn if you even have a chance in your specific circumstance, probably the smartest thing for you to do is actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, or take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that can be found at exboyfriendrecovery.com. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, taking that free quiz is super easy to do. All you have to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link you see there. It will take you directly to the quiz where you can fill it out and get an easy answer on what you should be doing going forward and overall what your chances look like in your specific situation. All right, so let's get you back to the video.
For the most part, that advice still works, but my mind's been changed a little bit. So in 2020, we really started to research our success stories. I wanted to find commonalities among them, and we found some interesting things. We found really two big commonalities that all of our success stories had in common. The first one is most of our success stories have some type of fear of loss element. They went on dates with other people. Their ex was terrified of them going on dates with other people, and that was a reason for commitment. Not necessarily a great reason for commitment. More on that in a second as well, but there's a fear of loss element. The second really big insight we learned is that most of our success stories got to this point emotionally during a no contact rule where they kind of didn't want their ex back anymore. It's the second insight. It's that insight that I think is the most powerful when it comes to silence. Now, most people assume that if you're silent, your ex will take that as you moving on and therefore they'll miss you, but it's actually more complicated than that. We've actually seen firsthand the difference between someone who authentically wanted to move on as opposed to someone who pretended like they wanted to move on. And the results are clear. Literally trying to move on is actually the best strategy for not only getting over an ex, but getting them back as well. So here's the point I'd like to argue. I think the most important thing about silence after a breakup, about the no contact rule after a breakup, is that you shouldn't break it until you've gotten to this place emotionally where you're ready to outgrow your ex. You're ready to get over them. You don't have them on the pedestal anymore. Generally speaking, this lends itself to longer periods of no contact. And it gets really messy when you dive into the data because most people who try no contact rule fail it the first time. And so it tricks us. When I say this tricks us, think of it like this. Let's say you're intending to do a 30-day no contact rule. Around day 21, you can't take it anymore. You break it a little bit prematurely and talk to your ex. So that's 21 days where you're trying to move on to your ex. You have the right intentions, but you just can't do it. So you break it. So what do you have to do? You have to start the no contact rule over from the beginning. And then you see it through to the end. 30 days. That's a 51-day no contact rule. And the important thing is the intent of the silence. Are you outgrowing your ex? To me, this is how long you should be being silent. Yes, we're finding that most people can get to this point where they're ready to outgrow their ex after 30 to 45 days. We're also finding people sometimes need longer than that. And it gets messy because a lot of times people break the no contact rule prematurely when they shouldn't break the no contact rule prematurely, which adds to that intent of silence time. But I think the critical strategy is getting to that place emotionally where you are ready to move on from them. But why does that work? Well, if you haven't read my pretty great article that I did with Tyler Ramsey, who's a coach for us, I suggest you check it out. Basically, we went through 5 major stages that a dismissive avoidant will go through post-breakup. So there's 5 stages that most avoidants will go through. First one is they avoid all things about the person. Second one is as they're avoiding all those things about the person, their feelings begin to bubble to the surface. Then they try to suppress those feelings and they go back and forth, pogo sticking between the two stages 2 and 3. Where the feelings begin to bubble, they suppress. Feelings begin to bubble again, they suppress again. And then they begin to move on. And then after they've moved on, they have nostalgia for you. I wrote an article actually yesterday before I filmed this video where I lovingly referred to these stages as pogo sticking. Because literally an avoidant will jump back and forth between them often. It's hard to nail down which stage your ex is in, but oftentimes when your ex is giving you hot and cold signals, they're pogo sticking between stages 2 and 3. Why is this important for understanding how long you should stay silent after a breakup? Well, by simply understanding how avoidants operate, you're going to gain insight into the following things. You're going to understand why we're finding most exes aren't reaching out during no contact, and you'll understand why exes often don't consider getting back together until nostalgia hits. So let's tackle the first insight. Why is it that we're finding most exes aren't reaching out during these periods of silence? I want you to think about the first stage that avoidants go through. They avoid all things about that person. Often, when we're advising people to use a no contact rule, they're literally using it during the stage of the avoidant grieving process. Of course, they come into the no contact rule with unrealistic expectations. They see all of these stories, not just propagated by me, because I am 100% guilty of this. I will put my face and say, yes, I'm guilty of doing this. But they'll see all these stories of kind of unrealistic things, like someone whose ex wasn't an avoidant, someone whose ex was anxious, reached out to them 50 different times and begged for them back. They think, well, that could be me. But often those are rare cases. Those are the exceptions to the rule. Often we're finding exes won't be reaching out at all during no contact, which just proves what I'm saying about your intentions during the no contact being all the more important. Silence shouldn't be used at all for an ex. It should be used for yourself, which is a seamless lead into the next point I'd like to make. You need to understand nostalgic reverie. Now, I did a video a couple of years ago where I really talked about what really makes avoidant exes miss you. And I think it's one of my favorite evers because when I filmed it, some of the insights that I talk about there, I still talk about to this day across hundreds of different videos, because I think I've filmed like 70 or 80 videos since I filmed this one video, and I always try to make a point to mention it because it really helps people understand how exes operate who are avoidant and how different it is from how they're operating. So with avoidance, one of the things that we've learned is they don't usually consider coming back until this nostalgic reverie stage hits. Now here's the irony. If you know anything about avoidance, you'll know they're often marked by this strange paradox of wanting love, but not letting anyone close enough to give them that love. And this presents an interesting problem for our clients. How can you get close enough to attract them back to you? One of the great websites I found is a little website called freetoattach.com. And the website is basically dedicated to helping you understand avoidant attachment styles and the avoidant anxious sort of pairing and why they're so different and some of the coping things that they'll do. And they often talk about this concept called the Phantom X syndrome, which is kind of great because we deal with breakups. Now, the Phantom X operates because there was distance, not because the relationship was successful. It's a fixation on a past partner that affects budding new relationships, blocking them from getting close to someone else. So the important thing to understand here is avoidants are often drawn to partners that they can fawn over, but not get close enough to commit to, which explains the nostalgic reverie component. Often nostalgia doesn't kick in until an ex feels like you've moved past them, which also explains why the success stories we've interviewed all cite moving on during the no contact as something that they did. It indicates to an ex, oh, it's safe for me to miss you now. And what I think is happening is that our clients are going into the no contact rule with the correct intent, moving on. And they begin the process of doing so, which in turn kicks up the nostalgia within the avoidant who all of a sudden wants to try again. But of course, there's a flaw with this. Now, I'm proud of the work I've done at Ex-Boyfriend Recovery. I'm proud of the work I've done on the YouTube. Some people have pointed out inconsistencies I make. Sometimes I'm not perfect. By no means do I claim to have 100% success rate with anything. I'm learning too as I go. But I feel like I've done my best to come up with a successful strategy that is repeatable and works. But that doesn't mean the strategy is free from flaws. Yes, I am more than willing to talk about the biggest black eye I can think of. So what is that? Well, half the couples we help get back together break up again. What does that mean? What does that mean for you? Simply put, usually what happens is one or both parties continue behaviors that caused the original breakup in the first place. Now, we've been trying to combat this by educating you on attachment styles and their importance for having healthy and happy relationships. Our theory is if we can help our clients exhibit more secure behaviors in relationships, either one of two things will happen. Number one is you're going to come to this realization that you're not happy with your ex. You're happier with other people. You'll see that your ex wasn't the right one for you, and you'll find someone who is. To me, that's a win. Because most people come into our orbit thinking, I want my ex back, I'll do anything to get my ex back. But really what they want is a happy, healthy relationship, not just with their ex. They want the one. So that's the first thing that could potentially happen by simply educating you on attachment styles. The second thing that can happen is you're going to lead by example. Slowly but surely, your ex will recognize what a secure relationship is supposed to look like, and your relationship with them overall will improve, hopefully making it to where a breakup won't occur again. To me, this is another win. Our focus is on educating you about the psychology of what's working and then hopefully giving you the tools to succeed. So, I guess to answer the following question, how long you should stay silent after a breakup, stick to the 3 time frames we discussed, 21 days, 30 days, or 45 days, but understand that it's not just about sticking to the time frames. It's about the intent you have during the silence.